Hey, everybody, welcome to the Unconventional Therapist Guide to Nothing. My name is Dave. I'm joined here with my good friend Greg, who is
Mm.
under the weather and sick as hell. But
Sick as
yet, here,
hell,
here
but
he
here.
is.
Yeah, a little pale maybe in the screen here, but that's okay. We're
Yeah.
here and we show up. Um and it's interesting because like I felt like almost a captive in my own home for the past couple days, and this is an interesting topic for me. And I actually really like this topic because I think it sheds a light on a bunch of other topics. But yes, I'm not going to bring it up yet. And Dave, do you have any small talk that you're kind of chomping at the bit for right now?
To be honest with you, Greg, no, you got hit with what I had
Mhm.
about a week and a half ago. So I know the feeling that you have, and I'm gonna let us just kind of get right into this episode. I think that's appropriate because I feel like you probably want to get off here as soon as possible and go to bed.
I probably do, but it does make me feel a little bit better to kind of be here, taking my mind off of it. So
Interesting concept. How and that's been present for me a few times where like I haven't felt good all day and all of a sudden I come on here to do what we got to do and suddenly you just kind of forget.
yeah, you try to forget, you shift focus a little bit. Like it's in my gut, and if I and I thought to myself, worst case scenario, I throw up on the computer, whatever. I'm at home.
And I mean that's like best case scenario because I'm recording
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I will
And
have that on
and then maybe we'll
record.
get a couple of views off of that thing.
That is
Dave,
going on social media and that may go viral.
we work a lot, don't we, Dave?
We kind of do.
And maybe that's like part of being run down, but that's not why I bring it up. Have you ever had like a really terrible boss yet? Let me ask you that question first. Have you had a really terrible boss in your past?
I've had bosses that I've struggled with. I don't
Hmm.
know that they would be what I would consider terrible because I've heard horror stories about bosses and I think I'm lucky that I haven't had those experiences, but I've definitely had bosses I've struggled with in the past.
So you've had bosses that you kind of you didn't really care about their opinion, and they were kind of bothersome and a pain in the ass in a sense,
Yeah,
right?
I definitely have had bosses where I felt like their mission was more of to make me feel like I was in the wrong all the time than it was like, than trying to actually help me better myself as an employee.
Interesting. So did you ever find yourself in a position where you were trying to seek their approval, this boss that you did?
Probably. I mean, don't, yeah, I mean, probably. I say probably, but knowing me, probably not because I'm pretty spiteful.
Oh, wow. Okay, good. Well, maybe you are impervious to this syndrome, not a diagnosis, but a syndrome that we're going to be talking about today. We love our syndromes, don't we?
We do. So just for people who maybe don't, that's a great, I never thought about explaining that. What's the difference between a diagnosis and a syndrome?
It's a tough question. I think the difference between a syndrome and a diagnosis is that syndromes have a little bit more personality in a sense. Or I guess what I mean by that is they show up differently in different people. So if you have a diagnosis, if you have diabetes, kind of show up in the same way you that it's going to show up in me, but a syndrome might be different that way.
What if I had diabetes syndrome?
Well, Dave, I don't know. That's a great question. I don't know, but I like it. But we're not talking about anything like that. Listen, we'll work on the syndrome definition thing because I'm not exactly sure what that is. It doesn't quite meet the. Maybe it's more of like a cultural diagnosis. It might be something that can exist within one culture but not another. It doesn't transcend cultures like diabetes syndrome might. You know what I mean? So it might be something like that. I'm not positive. But today we're talking about Stockholm syndrome, something that we've all probably heard of at least, right?
Yeah.
And I love these psychological phenomenon where like it's like something's going on that's paradoxical and doesn't make sense. So like this is when victims of a crime, a kidnapping, I guess like a hostage situation, they begin to develop positive emotions towards the people that are keeping them captive. And it even goes beyond emotions. It's more like loyalty, like friendship,
Yeah.
love even, right?
Romance.
Romance sometimes. And you know, it's connected to survival. We'll talk about that. And to me, it's connected to learned helplessness and conditioning. Almost like Dave, when you go to boot camp, or yeah, I guess that's one of the better examples. Like, you could think of like as a cult too. There's certain things that need to happen where the idea is we're going to break you down before we build you back up again.
Yeah.
And in boot camp, they separate you from everything. They change your ideology, forget everything you knew. Your girlfriend's cheating on you, like all these little things. They break you down and then they give you little glimmers of like this is good for you, and you start to I don't know even kind of like respect slash love these people, right?
Yeah.
And it's an attachment disorder in a sense, right? Like the victim,
Ooh.
it
Yeah.
is.
Okay.
I called it almost like a traumatic attachment.
Did you
It's
coin that?
I traumatic attachment I might have. I didn't see that anywhere.
Okay.
So the victim bonds with the abuser to cope. And I want to talk about that more as we go on. It's powerful too because it's not just this person, it's okay. It is okay. They're all right. It's I love them. I want to know more about them. It's weird cultish loyalty. And I think that as we go further down, I looked at some of your notes and like I'm gonna have a spot to like jump in with that because
I
I'm
don't
gonna
know
have
what
a
he's talking about. I don't do notes. This is all off
Oh,
my
this is all on the top of your
brain.
head.
Yeah, I
Amazing.
have no idea what
Oh,
he's talking about. I'd like
those are
to
just
talk more about
references.
this term that I created and just copyrighted, traumatic attachment.
Oh, you would? Okay, good. Yes. And you can edit this however you want. So that's gaslighting. Get into that. Dark psychology, maybe.
Yeah. All right, Greg. So, I just want to say one thing as we're before we go forward with like the origins and everything. Uh, I think it's really fascinating when you think about something like this. So, there's clearly plenty of events that have happened in history where this could
Mhm.
have originated, but it didn't originate until this was this like the 70s, like one of
Yeah, it was the
the
70s, the early 70s.
so it's interesting that this dynamic didn't like really wasn't really acknowledged, I guess,
Well, I don't
until the
know that it
70s.
wasn't acknowledged. I just don't think that it's interesting. It's like that concept creep thing. There wasn't a term for it, which is a very powerful thing,
Yeah,
right?
and that's kind of what I mean. It's interesting
Yeah.
that they didn't feel the need to term like this kind of phenomena. So it makes me curious as to what it was about that point in time where they were like, no, we need a word for this.
That's interesting. I don't know what it was about that point in time. Because you when you think about like even concentration camps,
The
um,
Trojan War,
right. There's
you
like
know?
times where people are held against it. Like I think of often, even the beginning of Man's Search for Meaning, the people who were running like the gas chambers and were Jews and they tried to gain favor with the Nazis while they were in the camp for survival. That's essentially what we're talking about here in a lot of ways. Also, if you read any slave narratives, Frederick Douglass recently reread that for something. And there's people there were slaves who would kind of get really close with the captors and you know it is definitely like a survival mechanism and we'll talk about
Yeah.
that more. But as
Yeah.
far as the origins go, and we'll also talk about like why it's a survival mechanism and why it seems like it doesn't make sense, but it actually really does make sense.
Hmm.
So the Swedish psychiatrist, it's always a cool psychiatrist that does this stuff. Niels Bergeron, right? He develops this term Stockholm syndrome because there's this huge bank robbery that goes down in Stockholm, and he's observing how the captors behave after they're let go, right? So they're held captive for a certain amount of time, and then after they let go, none of them want to testify against the people that did it. It's a really strange thing. And he's like, I wonder why that is. Like, there's that element we talk about sometimes of it's hard to hate someone once you know their story, whatever that is. But it's like this weird like their survival is threatened and then their primal instinct is to do whatever it takes to live. So the subconscious can either scan for like weaknesses in the people that are taking them captive, right? So it's like, oh look, their neck's exposed or whatever, right? Like what you would normally think of. Or your subconscious can scan for little cases of kindness and just like you would exploit a weakness, like they left the door open a little bit, or this person, has a bum leg, whatever it is, they try to exploit the kindness too. So they look for little signs of kindness. And then by seeing those things, that brief eye contact, that little smile, there's proof that this person has some compassion and they can kind of use that to, maybe try to exploit that a little bit and make a case for their own safety, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like you're gonna mention later on, it's like trauma bonding, but it's like this weird traumatic attachment, I think. You
Right.
start you hyper focus on these little quote unquote mercies. So, when someone kidnaps someone and then they give them a little bit of water, or um, I'll talk about later on that J.C. Lee Dugard, that story with that poor, little girl that was kidnapped when she was 11, and she
Hmm.
doesn't get let out till like 18 years later. She's raped for 6 years, like straight, and then she gets a little TV, and now like that little kindness it's you see the abuser as more of a good person forced into this weird difficult situation,
Right.
and like you start to, as the captor, adopt their views because you've been isolated. It's just like this weird survival strategy, and
Yeah, and but that's also what makes me the most curious about this
mm,
Stockholm syndrome is we I totally would initially view it as a survival tactic. Like, here's the part that starts to throw me for a loop though. It lacks the survival intent and then starts to feel like, wait a minute, is this actually more of an emotional buildup
mhm.
with that individual that's holding you captive? Like, it's almost it's almost like that parent to child relationship where the parent could be the worst parent in the world, but that child just has this view of what they want their parent to be. And when they show little glimpses of it, it's like, oh, and they like hold on to it so tightly, and they will almost stay in that relationship with their parent, or like, continue to have hope that their parent will have that love for them because of those little like glimpses that they show. It's
Yeah.
almost like it turns into like a parent child dynamic where they have this, when they show that moment of positivity towards them, they just have it in their mind, and it builds this like, oh well, maybe they do love me.
No, I think like what you're hitting on is perfect, because when a child is in that situation, it's like we talked about this before with dissociative identity disorder. Your fight or flight or freeze, it's all disengaged.
Yeah.
So in this certain type of thing, it's almost a given that escape isn't an option anymore. So just like a child, you're almost put back in that situation where my survival is completely based on this person. So they become almost like a parent in a sense,
Yeah.
because they're like they're your access to safety. They're your access. They're going to decide whether or not you live or die in a sense. And so that's a complicated. So yes, they are like the predator, but they're also a savior in a way too, because
Yeah.
your salvation's in their hands as well as
But
like
it's it's like that thing is, they're keeping me alive. There has to be a reason for this, right? Or they're not
yeah.
hurt. They're not. So if it's a like a bank robbery, right? Like in Stockholm, they're not killing us, so they must be keeping us alive for a reason or something. Like, it's almost like you start to like, just kind of let that sink in, and you process that, and then you start to change your view of your captor, and you start to grow a fond feeling
Yeah.
for them.
It's almost like self-deceit, right? It's
Yeah.
almost like that thing like I can't believe that this person is purely evil, because if I believe they're purely evil, then I'm doomed. It has
I can think of an example of an exact opposite version of this.
okay.
So we're talking about a captor, like in a kidnapping, right? A
Mhm.
captor, and that's taking care of the person they've kidnapped. They once in a while show positive actions towards the kidnappee, and the kidnappee then starts to kind of like look for more of those, and they start to grow a fondness of each other. Misery.
Oh my God, I love it.
Misery never changes his viewpoint of Kathy Bates's character throughout that entire dynamic, yet she does show him moments of positive actions or kindness. She fully loves him, and he never reciprocates. Pretends to for survival, but never fully feels it whatsoever. Right?
Yeah. So I think one of the conditions of first of all, great, great. I love the book and I love the movie. Kathy Bates and what James Caan, amazing.
Yeah.
Right?
Amazing.
Um, I think one of the conditions of Stockholm syndrome is to genuinely believe that escape is impossible. And I don't think he ever really
No,
felt
he
that.
never gave up. He
Yeah.
never gave up
And
that
that
fight.
might
You're
be
right.
it.
You're right.
You're hitting something,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Without this maybe maybe if you believe that this person is never going to be like I think that maybe he saw that she was psychotic
Yeah.
and he couldn't trust her like emotions
And he
because
also felt smarter than her because
yeah,
of that.
interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Cool take.
So I guess if you were thinking in like the larger scale, like not a one to one, we're looking at like bank robberies, someone coming
Mhm.
into any kind of building and taking it over, holding everyone at gunpoint. Super scary, right?
Yeah.
What changes the dynamic enough for people to leave there thinking we got to protect these people? We can't let them go down, right? Like,
Yeah.
I wonder what that dynamic is, because that's different than a one-to-one relationship. You don't get that same attention. You don't have the same bond. I don't think those victims of that kidnap of the bank robbery left there feeling like, oh, I'm in love with all these captors. um but they have a
So
protectiveness now.
I think there's like a weird thing that goes on with those situations. Um, so what if the police are trying to like rush in or other people are trying to save you, but then that's causing more danger, and then
you
so it's
you
almost
fear
like
you're going to die because of the people trying to save you,
yes, and so
right?
a weird psychological twist. It's
So
like
then you start to protect more, and then you just never stop protecting.
right, and then it's a really confusing thing, and it's
Yeah.
like and then you start to be like, well, all they really want is this. Is
Just
that so
give it to them.
far?
Just give it to
Yeah,
them.
yeah,
And then
exactly.
when they don't, you're like, then you just change your mind frame, and then
Right.
you're actually mad at the people that are actually trying to save you.
Yes.
And or maybe you realize that like the thing that they're up against, their fight, their cause,
Mhm.
you actually kind of believe in too. Maybe they
And
hit
don't
a same value as yours.
Sure. And listen to this though. Remember what happens during a trauma, we're kind of forgetting that a little bit too, is like at least for the most part, the analytical part of your brain is detached in a sense.
Oh, okay.
So it's like hard to
You're
kind of
not
really kind of
you're
have the
not
scales wrap your head
rationalizing.
around it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
So it's
good
very,
point. I'm glad you brought that up.
very emotional, right? It's a
Yep,
very emotional experience.
absolutely. Um, so can I get into some of the symptoms? Are we at that point?
Yeah, and I just wanted before you, I just want
Okay,
to say
go ahead.
like one thing that like it does prey on some of the things that are fundamental to being human, and that is attachment for one thing. We definitely need that connection, which is I guess the same thing, and hope, right? So it's like it's preying on all these things, and we can keep all these things, but they're like manipulated to stay alive. It's just it is it's more interesting than the term itself gets credit for. I think it's a very interesting like psychological sort of paradox. I really do.
Yeah, the term is forgettable.
It is Stockholm.
Yeah, it it when and I've heard and understood this term and then forgotten it so many times in my
Yeah.
life. I knew this term and all it kind of encompassed a long time ago. Forgot it. Had to look it back up. I remember when I watched Dog Day Afternoon, learned about it again after that. And then recently, when someone recommended this, because this is a listener recommendation episode, um, I was like, oh, I can't remember what Stockholm is. Didn't we already kind of do that? Then I
Yeah.
was totally thinking of uh Munchausen.
Munchausen, which is comes up. Actually, you
I
know what's
kind of
crazy? I
got
had
it
to
confused.
write that in an eval recently,
Yeah,
which is shocking.
interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I actually kind of got it confused with Munchausen. It's nothing to do with Munchausen, obviously.
Nope.
All right. All right. So symptoms of Stockholm syndrome. So as Greg already kind of mentioned, it would be like affection for or attachment to the abuser, attempting to help the abuser, distrust of or anger towards those trying to extract them from the situation. Like we gave the example of in the bank robbery, they might start to worry about, the police trying to save them. Uh,
Absolutely.
Rationalizing abuse, like they're doing this because of this reason, or oh, they have to do this because how else would we get through this? Perceiving basic dignity as kindness. I like the wording on that because that's kind of what we were talking about before, like a little TV time. It's like in all reality, like that's nothing.
Like a sip of water.
Sip of water, oh my goodness,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
My lips are dry.
You really care about me.
Yeah.
And the last one would be like feeling powerless. So kind of goes into what you were talking about earlier as well, that idea that there's no other way I'm surviving.
Hmm.
So we have to get through this together. Um, After leaving the abusive relationship or being held captive, so later they might start to have other symptoms, which could include denial, social withdrawal, chronic feeling of tension, feelings of emptiness, depression, anxiety, learned helplessness, excessive dependence, loss of interest in activities, embarrassment about their emotions towards an abuser, confusion, guilt, distrusting others, PTSD, nightmares, insomnia, flashbacks, startling easily. I mean, so many of those are combinations of depression, anxiety, and PTSD symptoms,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah, like kind of all wrapped together. You keep like using the term like abusive, and it's making me think of like just run-of-the-mill romantic relationships. And I wonder if people ever think about Stockholm syndrome in terms of abusive
Well, I was
relationships.
actually going to bring that up pretty soon.
Oh, good.
Yeah, no, that's definitely part of it. I don't think. Well, that's a different question, I guess. Do people ever think about it? Probably not.
I didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I always thought about it in terms of like captors.
So, well, there is a term, and what's the term? Battered woman syndrome. And I was
Mhm.
trying to. I meant to look that up before I started doing this, and I couldn't really find like a clear definition of what that was, so I kind of just left it. But there's that phenomena too, but that's different than this because there are this sometimes I think gets confused or compared to a few other things. So, for example, I've heard, like learned helplessness might be another one that this is kind of compared to, but that learned helplessness is actually more of a part of this than it is
Right.
something that's different than this. But like trauma bonding versus Stockholm syndrome. So with trauma bonding, it's similar, but it often involves empathizing with the abuser, and it's more in one direction and not reciprocal. So part of this is also that it's with Stockholm, it's not just the victim that starts to grow the attachment. The perpetrator
Yeah.
starts to grow the attachment as well.
This weird affinity for each other.
Yeah. So Stockholm syndrome involves mutual empathy being built between victim and abuser, not just a one way, which would be the trauma bonding is more like if Greg, you were abusing me, and I'm just like, oh, thank you, Greg.
I love you.
No, you don't say that. I say that.
Oh,
Because
right.
one
Sorry.
way, Greg.
My fault. So,
You just
you know what's
Stockholmed
interesting
out
though?
with me.
Trauma bonding, even as a therapist, I've always kind of thought of trauma bonding as when like, say like two teenagers had a really, tough upbringing and their parents are really hard to deal with and they're maybe they're both their fathers are alcoholics or they're both abused and they kind of get together and what brings them closer is their
I
bond.
thought that too, but when I was looking into it, they were talking about it in this one, like one person feels
Mhm.
connected to the other, not both of them feel connected to each other because of the experience.
That's kind of what I was like seeing with this too. In the trauma bonding seems like a newer like buzzword than Stockholm syndrome, but it's actually predates it, and it was
Yeah,
like what you would have described Stockholm syndrome
sure.
as before that. And I think that just like everything else, like these words take on new meanings when like you get on TikTok and social media and people are like, "Oh, we're trauma bonding" or something like that. It's like, we're
Yeah.
you
Oh,
know,
well, that's true because I know that trauma bonding became a very pop culture like word that people were throwing around. Yeah,
like
in
they had a
kind of
rough morning at
unhealthy.
work and they're getting margaritas and they're trauma bonding.
All right. I was actually thinking in some kind of like unhealthy ways
Oh, of course,
with
that
like
too.
teens and
Ye-
self-harm and their trauma
Yep.
bonding, through performing that together. It's yeah, it's definitely probably shifted over time.
Yeah, take a trip back to our concept creep episode and you'll see like the dangers of those kinds of words taking on meanings that they're not supposed to that wasn't the intention.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So causes
Mm.
here, we're gonna get into a little bit of what causes this syndrome. So here's some key factors that may lead to the Stockholm syndrome before Greg kind of gives some thoughts about causation of it itself. So some key factors that may lead to it would be being in an emotionally charged situation for a long time. So like you were mentioning the girl that was kidnapped, would you say
Mm.
at age 11
Age 11, yeah.
for how
Kidnapped.
many years?
She was kidnapped and she stayed kidnapped for 18 years.
Was that where was that?
I can't, where the heck
Was
was
that
that?
Ohio?
Yeah, I think it was. And she's the one, she had the two kids
Yeah.
with her. And that adds another crazy
Yeah.
layer.
Yeah. Yeah, that was I feel like I want to say Cleveland, but I could be
It's
wrong.
happened quite a bit.
Yeah.
There's a few of the like
Probably in Cleveland
basement
once.
people.
A lot of
Mm,
stuff happened in Cleveland, you know.
yeah.
Being in
Shout
a
out to Cleveland.
shared shout out Cleveland, what up? Being in a shared space with the hostage taker with poor conditions, like not having, you know, enough food or water or physically uncomfortable space. When hostages are dependent on the hostage taker for basic needs, when threats to life are not carried out. So, you know, if someone's constantly being told that they're about to be murdered and then that just doesn't happen, you know, get that sense of hope, or you start to kind of, I guess, try to understand why. um
Yeah.
when hostages haven't been dehumanized, so when they're actually treated like humans, that creates some kind of dynamic. Um, and a person might be abused and severely threatened by a captor or an abuser, but they may also rely on them to survive. So this is all stuff we've already kind of brought up in
Yeah.
here. If the
It's
abuser
weird
is in any
thinking.
way, is kind in any way, they're going to cling to that as, you know, trying to survive, and they might have sympathy toward them for this kindness.
Yeah, it's like it's you bring up something interesting there. Even it made me think of the immurement episode where like people were being buried alive or put in
Yeah,
little boxes that they don't quite fit in. And imagine like you're stuffed in a really uncomfortable spot, or maybe you're chained in a very uncomfortable way, and that area or that arm or whatever it is so sore, and then just given, just a chance to stretch out, you're like, oh my God, I would have done like thank you so much for like relieving that pain for me. Even
woo,
though it's like this weird confusing thing because you put me in that pain, but it's just.
you just
You're
come out,
right.
you're like, woof, that was tight. That was
It,
tight.
it
Feels real good right now.
I love you. You know what I mean? Really. And Dave, like you're right. So it's like we're just to kind of recap because we did say this, but it's like fight, flight, freeze, all kind of unavailable. And maybe the next thing is just obey, right? Isn't that kind of like what we're talking about? You almost become a child again. So escape's impossible. We talked about that. You have no way to live there, but now like that person with the smirk or that person with the little like I don't know, little sip of water, they definitely become a savior. And then there's this also added element of maybe in the beginning they were threatening your families, right? Like with hostages, that's a factor a lot of times. So now not only this person is the protector of you, they're the protector of your family as well.
Yeah.
And that's very in line with, I don't know, brainwashing, like things that we've talked about before. And even before, like you've mentioned, this is a very emotional manipulation. And what these people have to do, and another layer of this that I was kind of like untangling is they have to look for these emotional patterns or like these emotional transitions in their captors where it's like, oh, like he gets really mad when this happens, or they're calm when I behave this way. So by learning their emotional patterns, what they're kind of doing is getting to know them. And by when you're getting to know
Yeah.
someone, you're
You're growing
intrinsically,
feelings.
that's right, you're getting closer. Weird, like manipulation and perversion of the way that we're supposed to develop relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. As you were describing that, I was like, they're literally just growing closer and closer. And in that moment, that is the person who they are closest with. So
Yeah,
there's bound to be some kind of level of attachment. It's a
it's
relationship. It's a
it,
relationship. That's the biggest
there
thing
you go.
about it, right? It's a
It is a relationship.
relationship.
It's absolutely a relationship. A weird, forced, highly emotional, passionate almost
Yeah.
relationship. It's
Yeah.
it's like
It's
when like
intense.
the movies they save the kid from the fire and they hand it to the mother and the mother is like in love with this person immediately because that's the savior,
Yeah.
right? It's like thank it's almost like the word savior that's like
It's
intrinsic in our culture,
it's
you know.
every action movie where there's a two heroes kind of getting through a situation and then suddenly they are inevitably they kiss in the end and
Are they
like
not? Of
we're all watching like oh of course like we knew that
course.
was going to happen.
Trauma bonded. That's what happens.
Stockholm I guess.
Right. They got Stockholmed. Oh man, this is like, I mean, psychology, it really is something. Right?
It's a doozy.
It's a doozy.
So all right, I guess now we can get into the part that I was mentioning, different types of relationships where this may arise, because
Yeah.
you had brought up abusive relationships, I guess, and
Yeah,
that's
I'm
that's
interested in
definitely
that
one.
form of it.
Yeah. So abuse, whether it's sexual, physical, emotional, can all lead to confusing emotional bonds, and between the victim and the abuser. And these survivors may continue to feel love and affection far beyond the realm of the abuse, right? And want to protect or still feel that attachment after, right?
Mhm.
Well, I'm sure that happens quite a bit.
Yeah. And you know what else too that we're kind of leaving out here? Like in this, like you're talking about child abuse and even in romantic relationships, it's our need for love, which is a very real thing. In our like especially like we see with a lot of people the fear of being alone, the fear of being abandoned. Maybe obviously certain people are more susceptible to this than others, but it's like all of us have that desire for connection and love. It's very human.
And Greg, if I'm in a really stressful, dangerous situation, I'd much rather try to feel like the person that's holding me in this place. I'd much rather feel like they love me than they despise me and or want to kill me, right?
Absolutely. Seems to
So
be
I
the
may
best
even
option.
like try to, change the way I feel about the situation by trying to remain hopeful that they're going to see something in me that's going to give them positive feelings about me, right?
Absolutely. And kind of almost leave your identity to behind, which puts you even further away from yourself and puts you further even away from like your rational thought so that
Yeah,
you can be more of what it seems like they need
sure.
for survival.
Uh, Another type of relationship where this could come up would be child abuse.
Okay.
And it's that's obviously a very confusing thing for children and or any person that's part of that kind of relationship. So abusers will often threaten and physically harm the victims, obviously, but they might show kindness, which can be interpreted as love or affection, and that can cause there to be like this an emotional bond, and that may protect the abuser for a period of time. You often will see, we are talking about some of the after symptoms. I mean,
Mhm.
that's probably a big thing with child abuse, especially. There's that feeling of guilt or responsibility for what happened and things of that nature, right?
Yeah, and like loss of self-esteem. So do I
Yeah.
even, this is all I deserve?
Yep.
Yeah.
Justification of why things were done to them, things like that. Another one would be sports. So, some coaches on teams can be pretty abusive they're either verbally or even, sometimes probably physically.
Yeah, like
Um,
look what happened to Billy Bob
yeah.
on Varsity Blues.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Remember
Yeah.
Varsity
Right.
Blues?
Right. Right.
Yeah. And then the program too.
Mm-hmm.
Friday Night Lights, all these things where like, the coach may have been, abusive,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
And they strive for his approval despite like his lack of concern for their, well-being.
Yeah.
You're right.
um they the players, the youth or whoever might start to rationalize the coach's behavior, might even defend or sympathize with them, and it might lead to this syndrome from occurring.
It's very interesting.
And then sex trafficking. They're often trafficked and forced into sex trade work, and they become bit dependent on the captors for their basic needs to be met, and this might cause them to start to develop an emotional bond as a way to survive.
And then the outside looking in, it's so funny that you brought this up. I'm watching this new show, The Pit, and it's about hospital work, right? And there was this woman that came in, it was just a very beautiful woman with another very beautiful woman, and they were kind of like asking, there was a sexually transmitted disease situation, and they were like, well, how did this happen? And they started to get the feeling that this might be a sex trafficking situation,
Hmm.
and it didn't look like what you would typically guess or what I would typically guess is a sex trafficking situation, but I guess I'm ignorant to all that. And the woman, despite having every opportunity to leave this situation, just felt like she couldn't and would not turn on the person that had brought her in, even though it was kind of like behind the scenes as viewers, we knew what was really going on. But she wouldn't turn on this person despite having every opportunity in a major city to just get away from this.
Yeah.
And it's like watching that, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, this
Right.
is your chance here. But then, even in JC Lee Dugard, she was around people tons of times.
This this is one of those things that I truly feel nobody can understand if they haven't been through it. I don't think there's any way that despite all these explanations, if we watched a scenario of it happening, we wouldn't want to like pull our hair out
Yeah,
or, scream at the person because we wouldn't be able to fully put ourselves in their shoes and understand the feelings they are feeling.
it's such a true thing. That's such a real point. It's you don't outside looking in, it looks obvious, but emotions are strong as like you could tell someone a million reasons why they shouldn't be depressed, but then that doesn't make it easy to not
Yeah.
feel depressed,
It
right? It
it
can be
is
rational as hell to
yeah.
not be depressed in this moment. Your
That's
life
a,
could be great.
that's exactly what I was going to say. It is void of all rationality, right?
Yeah.
Any reason is out the window. Before we get into pop culture references, why don't you give the real life examples and then we can do pop culture?
Okay, so of course, I think when anytime we talk about Stockholm syndrome or hear it, the name Patty Hearst probably comes up. Is that true for you?
Yes.
Okay, so Patty Hearst was a big deal because her grandfather was William Randolph Hearst. I don't know if you knew who that was from like history class. But he basically invented newspapers. And a long time ago, newspapers were it. Like the newspaper like magnates or like these owners of these newspapers, because there's only a few, were like the richest people in the world. So here's this woman, rich as can be. She's abducted because she's rich as can be by like the Symbionese guard. It's some kind of like radical group. Anyways, they abduct her and and I'm just gonna spell that for you. It's Symbionese. It's like a liberation army. It's
Symbionese.
yeah. So they're trying to garner money for their cause. And so they abduct her and they keep her for a while and she's abused and she's this and she's that and she's held captive for a long time. And then the next time you see Patty Hearst is in this famous picture. She's wearing the beret and everything. She's holding a machine gun and she's committing bank robberies with these people. So it's like a perfect example of how this can go, right?
Yeah.
And then obviously because she's so well connected, they're kind of able to pull her away from that. And at first she's defending them. She's defending them. Dave, to the point where like she wouldn't just let it go. She spends 22 months in prison.
Yeah.
Crazy, right? I mean, her own
It's
like
wild.
crazy. And then she later, which I find very interesting, marries her bodyguard. Um, and I think in a sense you marry someone who can protect you from this whole thing, right? Just very, very interesting case. That's an episode on its own. She also becomes very interesting later in life. John Waters, who you probably are
Oh
familiar
yeah.
with, takes a liking to her, and she's in the movie Crybaby.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, she's like the mom, not like the scary lady, which I shouldn't say. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, and there's also like I talked about J.C. Lee Dugard. I read the A Stolen Life like a while back. It's just really intense. It's really hard. It's really sad. This person was kidnapped when they were a child and groomed in a sense. I maybe it's grooming is a part of it that we don't really like. Is it like a really quick grooming? Because there's two ways that we're
Hmm.
kind of describing this. It's like immediately like you're detached, it's traumatic, and there's this like traumatic attachment, and then there's the other side of Stockholm syndrome, which might be even a little bit of a different thing, where it's like you're slowly broken down, and then you don't even know who you are anymore, and you're built back up in a whole different identity that was there.
Just for the record, this was also in California, not Ohio.
Okay,
I
so
was
then
thinking
the
of these
Ohio one's
other,
different.
the
There's another one.
Ohio kidnappings. Yeah, yeah, that was
That was a few women he
it
had.
was three, if I remember
Yes.
correctly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this was a woman and her, so the captor
I just want to
impregnated her.
formally apologize to Ohio and specifically Cleveland for
Well, Cleveland had
the
their own
previous
then.
comments I made.
They had their own.
Yeah.
They tripled up on it.
Okay.
So I mean, these are like, and then of course there's the Stockholm incident, when they were the robbing of the bank there, and which kind of started this whole thing. But it didn't start this whole thing because this is a phenomenon that's very human and has been going on for, I mean, you see it in pop culture in where like somebody's, you know, like I remember watching this movie, I can't remember what it was, but like George Washington was super close with his slave. And it's like the slave, I don't know, like did he, it's a weird relationship there just because of the nature of the position, right?
Right.
Like it's very strange that way. Um,
So pop culture references, as
on.
you just mentioned, the one that first came to my mind was King Kong.
Yeah.
So he picks up his victim, right?
Yeah.
And he finds her fascinating and beautiful, and she has to start to go along with some of it, right? Because he could easily crush her, he could throw her, he could do whatever. Next thing you know, he's climbing up, you know, giant skyscrapers with her in his hand, and she's protective of him.
And he loves her too.
He definitely loves her too. Yep.
He sure does.
He
And
sure
where
does.
does he see that going, by the way?
Who knows?
You know what I mean? I
Just
mean, come on. Oh, like what also do you think about this? Like any pet anybody's ever had is a kind of a victim of Stockholm syndrome.
yeah,
I mean, right? I mean, like a rescue pet, does that dog want to be captured and brought into your house? Not really.
that's all he knows.
But then he's gonna have to get used to you and he's gonna love you and you're gonna
Yeah,
love him.
you're gonna love him no matter what he does to you.
Right? Even if he bites you. You're like, no, he's okay.
Beauty and the Beast
Great.
is a great example of this as well. And similar dynamics here. Like she sees glimpses of kindness and
Yeah.
she wants them to come out more. So she tries harder to like get those, and she's totally a prisoner.
Yeah. She sees him like playing with birds or something.
Yeah.
She
She's like,
sees him.
oh,
Yeah,
oh.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then there's also like there's the snow scene. There's a whole
Yeah.
maybe there's something there that wasn't there before.
I mean,
Like,
and the talking clock doesn't help.
right.
So
No. There's a whole that song is I wonder if the name of that song is Stockholm Syndrome. Like and I can't remember the like, exact people are probably screaming at
wait, be our
the
guest.
no, not Be Our Guest. There's like perhaps there's something there that wasn't there before.
Perhaps there's something. Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
can already
They're
hear it in
like
my head
playing in
now.
the snow
Yeah.
and she's like, oh, he's very tender in this way. Oh, he let me
Uh,
read a little book. Oh, he's letting me like walk out of the I can have the whole West Wing. Like whatever, right? It's like kind of very Stockholm
in
on the
my
money.
head, I was trying to sing the song in my head, and then for some reason it then transitioned to "Can You Feel the Love Tonight?" And I don't think
Mm.
that's from Beauty and the Beast. That's probably because I just watched
Can you feel the
Mufasa the
love
other
tonight?
day. I think that
Right.
wasn't that
It's
Lion
very
King?
Lion King, yeah. Great, another great tune though.
Yeah,
Beauty and the Beast. Wow, great call on that because that's on the money. That means that it should be Beauty and the Beast syndrome because it's fun to have those
it
little
would
kinds of,
be. Yeah, it
you're
would
right.
be a great term for it.
Because
I
Peter
like
Pan
King Kong
syndrome,
syndrome.
it's not bad. That could
Wait,
be
Denzel Washington and Ethan Hawke in Training Day.
Training Day syndrome.
Training Day
What,
syndrome.
what about V for Vendetta? Have you
Yeah,
ever seen that?
I have. I just can't remember it much, to be honest
Um,
with you. I wish I could.
Natalie Portman,
Yeah.
she gets captured by V and she starts to see his political views and kind of
See,
empathize.
that's more of like the Patty Hearst
That's very Patty
version of it
Hearst.
because she
Yep.
starts to really pick up the political views. Yeah.
Yeah, she's like, and she has to on some level be like, this can't work on any level, but let's try it. You
You
know,
have a plastic face.
you have a plastic face. There's one of you. Doesn't seem the
Right.
options aren't great right now.
Sure.
Crouching Tiger. I don't know if you remember that. They're dancing around on the treetops and the leaves. That was a very Stockholm Syndrome movie.
Never saw it.
Really?
Hmm.
Visually stunning. What about The Chase? Here's two movies that I thought of that are very similar because they both have 90s bombshells. And that's Christy Swanson, who, I mean, that was like and Alicia Silverstone. So The Chase and Excess Baggage, both essentially, one was with Charlie Sheen and the other one was Benicio del Toro, but they're both like, we kidnap these women
Hmm.
and somehow love us towards the end.
I didn't see either of those.
Okay. What about the Mexican? Brad Pitt,
Nah,
Julie Roberts.
didn't see that.
Really?
Yeah.
All great examples of, I
I
almost said,
got I got one last pop culture one, and this is more of a question for
okay.
any listeners out there. If there's any Twin Peaks fans, uh, Leo Johnson's relationship with oh my goodness, I'm forgetting her name now. His wife, the waitress at the Double R Diner. If you guys think that's a Stockholm syndrome based on how we're describing it, please let us know. I kind of am starting to think it is because even though she's cheating on him, she is very protective of him and not wanting it. Well, she stays in the relationship and he's very abusive towards her. So there's
You
a
know,
question. You've never seen Twin Peaks.
you've really got me wrapped up with like the Beauty and the Beast thing. It puts a whole spin on the whole movie now, or I don't know, fairy tale.
Yeah.
I think and
You
if I
know,
wonder if you read the original, it would
there
be,
is, yeah, it would be interesting because, like, if you think about a lot of these fairy tales that we've just kind of grown accustomed to, there's so many of them that have like a dark element that we just kind of ignore.
yeah, a lot of abuse. Cinderella, tons of abuse.
Yeah.
A lot of stepmother stuff.
I just rewatched Snow White,
Like
the
the original?
the original cartoon. Yeah, the first animated Disney film. I think it's
Yeah,
actually the first full feature animation ever, if I
it
remember
is.
correctly.
It is.
And I watched it. It's actually amazing how well it looks considering how old it is, and it's a nice story. It is dark. I love the transition when the evil witch turns into like the old hag,
Yeah.
and she's like, if you watch that scene, there's all like this is spooky stuff. It's a really cool scene. But there's some, I mean, it's a kind of a dark tale if you think about it.
Of course it is.
She's trying to kill her.
She's trying to kill her, yeah. And I wonder like if it would be fun to even cover like one or two of these like grim
Yeah,
fairy tales,
grim fairy tales. Yeah.
you know? That's where they all so fun.
I don't know if I can really talk about it. I just watched a movie that's coming out soon, and here's what I can say about it. It's called The Ugly Stepsister. I won't give a review of it because I'm not allowed to yet. Um, it is a darker version, or like a twisted version of Cinderella,
Mm,
but it focuses on one of the stepsisters, her ugly stepsisters, and it's all about vanity and trying to make yourself like they want to be pretty and perfect so that the prince will choose them, and it just focuses on like the lengths that they'll go to. So it's like it's for people who have seen The Substance, which was an amazing film with Demi Moore recently, and she's like just trying to stay attractive and beautiful in
yeah.
this world where she's aging, and everybody wants the next best thing, right? And she's
Is
trying to
that a
stay.
horror movie, The
Oh
Substance?
yeah, it's like body horror. It's very like disturbing and grotesque. This is like a version of that, but it's through like the ugly stepsister and the lengths that they would go through to become beautiful. um it's really good when it comes out. It's French, and so it is subtitled, but
Yeah.
I would recommend watching that when people get a chance.
What about, have you ever read the book Beautiful Monsters?
Why does that sound familiar? Is that Chuck
It's
Palahniuk?
it is,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
yeah, no, I've seen that. Yep. I
Yeah.
mean, I've
And
read that.
yeah, it's that's really kind of good where it's like you have this beauty and then now you don't, and what's that like
Yeah.
psychologically?
Yeah.
Like what do you have?
I know I mentioned it to you recently. I definitely want us to do a few Chuck Palahniuk
Love
novels at
to.
some point because
Yeah,
there's a lot of different stuff we can talk about there.
absolutely. Good stuff.
Yeah. All right. Well, Greg, anything else we should mention about Stockholm before we wrap this puppy up?
No, actually, it was a lot more fun than I thought it would be.
Okay. Good. I'm glad that you thought this was gonna suck and it didn't for you. So I'm
Well,
glad you.
it's a hard one because it's like Stockholm syndrome. People gain feelings when they're kidnapped.
Yeah, but you know what? The reason why it's a great one for us is it is literally all psychology based.
It is.
It's only psychology. Because it's all just how something is developed in a person's mind and how it plays out for them in the relationship.
Yeah,
So
and why they
it's
behave the way they do.
yeah, so it's perfect. So shout out to I believe it was Kate who had recommended this episode. Thank you for recommending a good one here. And I'll just go through our spiel. Patreon, we got 3 bonus episodes up already. And now we've just discussed we are probably going to get a 4th one up pretty soon. So if you haven't subscribed yet to our Patreon, make sure you check that out. Our bonus episodes are only available on Patreon or Apple Subscribe. You can get them a little bit cheaper on Apple Subscribe, but it's only audio. So if you go on Patreon, you get to check out the video versions of these episodes, and there may be other perks down the road for Patreon subscribers.
Mhm.
Um, we appreciate everybody who has been rating and reviewing. We still always want to encourage, if you haven't done so, please leave a rating and review wherever you can do so. You can comment on certain episodes on like Spotify, I just recently learned, and on Patreon. If you're on there, definitely feel free to interact with us. Follow us on social media, Instagram, X, and TikTok. We've been way more active in the past couple of weeks, so we're gonna, continue with that motivation, and it's great ways for people to be able to kind of shoot the shit with us and recommend stuff. So yeah, yeah, loving the interactions lately. Just again, want to encourage, the reason why we always ask for these ratings and reviews is because it is what helps us get these episodes out there to the general public. The more that things are rated and more that they're reviewed, the more likely it is that they're going to be recommended to other listeners. So we appreciate any support in that area. But yeah, all right. Well, we'll wrap this up and we will see you all next week.
See you all next week.
Hopefully Greg is feeling better by then. Hopefully his tummy ache is better.
Yeah, boo boo.
Just messing. So yeah, well, hopefully he'll feel better and he'll be 100% for the next episode. But yeah, we got, what do we got? Easter episode next week, I believe.
Mhm.
So that'll be a fun one, maybe. And
We're
yeah,
hoping.
we'll see you then. Thanks everybody. Have a great night. Peace.